You know, for centuries, the story of Ragnarok has been the ultimate tale of cosmic doom, a prophecy that was totally set in stone. But what happens when a video game takes that ancient script, rips out a few key pages, and hands the pen to a character who was never, ever supposed to be there? Well, that's what we're digging into, how God of War's Ragnarok dares to rewrite one of history's most famous myths.
I mean, this is the big question, right? The entire Norse saga is this incredibly intricate clockwork of prophecy, where every single piece is meant to fall into its predetermined place. But then you have Kratos, the ghost of Sparta. He's a gear from a completely different machine. He is the wrench in the works, and his very presence opens up the possibility for a whole new story.
And this comparison, it gets right to the heart of it. It's a fundamental shift in philosophy. The original myths are all about fatalism. The gods know exactly how they're going to die, the world knows how it's going to end, and there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it. But the game just flips that script entirely, turning it into a story about agency, the idea that you can see a terrible future coming and actually choose to fight for a better one.
So, how in the world does the game pull off such a massive thematic change? Well, it all starts with one character who, let's be honest, just doesn't belong here.
Kratos isn't just a new hero, he's the narrative catalyst for everything. See, because he comes from a totally different pantheon, he isn't bound by any of the Norse prophecies. He is a complete unknown, a wild card. And that single fact is what gives everyone else in the story the chance to break free from their own fated paths.
Now, before we see just how much the game changes things, it's really important to know where the original story even comes from. The Prose Edda is pretty much the foundational text for a lot of what we know about Norse mythology. So think of this as the original screenplay. And now, we're about to look at some seriously radical rewrites.
Okay, this is where the changes get really dramatic. In the fates of the gods themselves. The game takes these characters with iconic, famous deaths and gives them entirely new endings, and a lot of the time, much more personal ones.
First up, the king of the Aesir gods himself, the obsessive and paranoid Allfather Odin. His end in the original myths is absolutely legendary.
So in the myth, Odin's death is huge, it's cosmic, but it's almost impersonal. He gets eaten by a giant monster as part of this grand prophecy. The game, though, makes it deeply, deeply personal. He's defeated by the very heroes he spent years tormenting, and that final killing blow? It's delivered by Sindri, a dwarf whose life Odin had personally and completely destroyed. It's not about destiny, it's about revenge.
All right, next up, probably the most famous Norse god of them all. Everybody knows the story of Thor fighting the giant World Serpent, right?
Now this does way more than just alter Thor's fate. It's actually meant to redefine the story's main villain. In the myth, Thor gets a glorious warrior's end, a mutual kill against his greatest enemy. In the game, he's murdered by his own father for a single moment of defiance. It's such a cruel act, and it cements Odin not as some king fighting for his people, but as a total tyrant obsessed with control.
And what about the original Norse god of war? You know, the one Kratos basically replaces at the top of the food chain.
This might just be one of the cleverest twists in the whole story. The mythological Tyr dies a warrior's death, just like you'd expect, but the game completely reimagines him. He's not a warrior anymore, he's a pacifist who is trying to find peace. By having him survive, the game is suggesting that the future isn't about more war, but about building something new, a theme embodied by the very god who used to personify conflict.
It's not just the gods who get a total rewrite. The game also takes two of the most important monsters from the entire saga and gives them completely new and, frankly, surprising roles to play.
So get this, the game takes a pretty straightforward death and turns it into this mind-bending time paradox. Your Mungandar doesn't just die. Its final battle with Thor is the very event that becomes its own origin story. It's a perfect closed loop, which plays beautifully into the whole theme of cycles and the struggle to finally break them.
And just look at this transformation for Fenrir. A creature that was once a symbol of inevitable, world-ending destruction becomes a symbol of love and loyalty. By tying Fenrir's fate directly to Atreus' personal journey, the game takes this apocalyptic monster and makes him a character we actually care about, completely flipping his original purpose on its head.
So, if the gods aren't dying according to plan, and the monsters are playing totally different roles, what does that actually mean for Ragnarok itself? Well, the very nature of the apocalypse completely changes.
I mean, this chart pretty much says it all.
The mythological Ragnarok is total annihilation. All 9 realms are gone. The world is submerged in water and everything has to start from scratch. The game, however, drastically pulls back the scale of destruction.
And the reason for this change is purely thematic. The game isn't trying to tell a story about the end of the world. It's telling a story about the end of a corrupt regime. By saving the other 8 realms, the narrative shifts from this cosmic rebirth to the much more hopeful idea of political rebuilding and healing after tyranny.
All of these changes, the fates of the gods, the roles of the beasts, the scale of the apocalypse, they are all serving one single, powerful, central theme.
And that brings us to the philosophical heart of the entire game, breaking fate. While the myths teach us to accept our destiny, the game champions defiance. It reframes prophecy not as a life sentence, but more like a diagnosis. And once you know what's wrong, you can start working to find a cure.
The game literally shows us this theme on the prophecy wall in Jotunheim. The characters find a mural that shows their entire journey, right down to Kratos' foretold death. But by seeing it, by knowing what's supposed to happen, they are empowered to reject it. They make different choices, and in doing so, they prove that the future really isn't set in stone.
You know, Kratos himself sums it up absolutely perfectly with this line. The entire journey is about moving past who you were, rejecting who you're told you will be, and forging a new identity based on your own choices. It's the ultimate rejection of fate. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. The original myths are powerful because of their tragic, unavoidable nature. But by changing that ending, did God of War create something even more powerful for our time? A story that tells us that destiny isn't a cage, but a choice. It's definitely something to think about.